Is nature paying a heavy price of our conflicts? What is ecocide and why are there demands of including this as a separate serious offense under the Rome Statute? Hello students, welcome to Drishti IAS. My name is Saloni Nandkulier, and in this session let us decode what ecocide is. What challenges does the environment have to face when we talk about such human conflicts like war and escalation, and what do we have at the moment? What are the provisions, legal provisions that we have for ecocide? Okay, so let's see why this is in news. So there was a recent report that was published by Lebanon and it actually accused Israel for committing ecocide. So in 2022, 23, 24, when there was an Israel invasion on southern Lebanon, Lebanon said that Israel committed ecocide, which actually altered the physical and ecological landscape of Lebanon. Then Iran also accused Israel. Iran also said that Israel's bombings of fuel depots in Tehran have led to black rain. So the burning of this fuel and burning of these fuel depots led to gaseous emissions, and when these gaseous emissions they actually mixed with the water vapors in the atmosphere, they caused something that was heavily polluting and dangerous, and that was the black rain. So Israel again committed ecocide. This is what Iran also said. And time and again, researchers have been using this term, and especially in the context of Gaza's agricultural land deterioration. Again, in that case also, Israel was accused of committing ecocide. So ecocide becomes important for us. What is ecocide? Why is it important for us to stop ecocide? What are the legal provisions that we have? And what is still the lacuna? Okay, so let's start with what is ecocide. Ecocide, killing of the environment. Killing of the environment, meaning that when human actions cause large scale, long-term damage to what? To the environment, then it is termed as ecocide. Killing of the environment due to human actions, any long-term damage, large-scale devastation that is happening in the environment because of human actions, that will be categorized as an ecocide. And for the first time, this term was used by Arthur W. Galston. Arthur W. Galston in 1970, when he was criticizing a chemical named Agent Orange. Agent Orange. So Agent Orange was actually a chemical that was used by the US to cause massive destruction in the forests of Vietnam, burn the forest of Vietnam, because at that time the Vietnamese fighters, they were practicing guerrilla warfare. So in order for them to make it visible, or in order for basically avoiding these fighters to escape, this was happening, that the US carried out this massive burning of all the forests, major forests in Vietnam, by making use of this chemical that was Agent Orange. And interestingly, Arthur had actually helped in the making of this agent. It had helped in the development of this agent first, but he later criticized it when he got to know about the negative consequences, the massive impact, environmental damage that was caused because of this chemical. He later criticized it and gave the term ecocide. He gave the term ecocide. So we know what is ecocide. Now it is important for us to understand what are the legal provisions that talk about ecocide. Do we really have enough provisions, enough laws that treat environmental damage as a serious crime? So that is exactly not the case. That does not mean that it is not being talked about in any of the laws, in any of the provisions. Ecocide is being talked about, environmental damage is being talked about, but explicitly it is not an international crime. So the first provision that we talk about is the Rome Statute. The Rome Statute, it has 4 serious offenses, 4 serious crimes. It has categorized everything into 4 serious crimes. 1, genocide. Genocide is a serious crime. Then crime against humanity is a serious crime. Then war crimes. War crimes are a serious crime. And then crimes of aggression. Aggression also a serious crime. So do we have ecocide explicitly mentioned as a serious crime? No. Ecocide is mentioned here in the war crime category. Ecocide is mentioned in the war crime category. Now you might wonder what is the issue, even if it is mentioned implicitly, if it's mentioned in the war crime category, what is the issue? Why do we really want to have a separate category for ecocide? So we'll discuss the need, but first let's understand where is ecocide mentioned. Okay, so in the Rome Statute it is mentioned here in the war crimes category. Then if we talk about the Geneva Conventions, Geneva Convention, this is talking about warfare. And this also discourages countries from negatively impacting or harming the environment of any other country. While they are carrying out their war activities, they should not be targeting the environment of any other country. This is mentioned in the Geneva Convention also. And then we have the Environmental Modification Convention. Environmental Modification Convention, which says that whenever any two countries or more countries, they are at war, one country, if it is technologically superior, it cannot modify the environment of the other country to cause damage to other country. For example, it cannot carry out artificial flooding or artificial rain or anything of that sort where it's trying to modify the environment of the other country because it's technologically superior. That will be considered to be a crime. So environment has been mentioned, not explicitly that you're targeting only the environment of that country, and explicitly it has not been mentioned. We are saying that you cannot try to modify the environment. Modify the environment, and modification of environment might not always mean a big destruction, but modification of environment is not allowed. Then targeting the environment over here, it is discouraged in the Geneva Convention. And when we talk about Rome Statute, when we talk about international crimes, it is not explicitly mentioned. It is mentioned as a part of the war crime. But there are limitations. There are limitations. So what is the need for recognizing ecocide as a separate international crime? So first and foremost, if we talk about the Rome Statute, it has anthropocentric nature. Anthropocentric nature meaning placing humans at the center. So I told you this is a war crime. This is a war crime. Like it's a crime under the war crime category, and it is going to be considered to be a crime only if humans were being targeted. Humans were being targeted. And if it was done during a war. Number one, humans were being targeted, meaning that while causing damage to the humans, while targeting the humans, if environmental damage also happens, in that case we are going to consider it to be a damage to the environment. But what about times where environment is being intentionally damaged, where we are not trying to target the humans but only target the environment? So this is a gap. It is not mentioned over here. It is not mentioned in the provision. It is simply saying that when humans are being targeted, in that case, when environmental damage also happens, we are going to consider it to be an ecocide, right? So it's an anthropocentric nature that we are treating only humans as the victim, whereas the need of the hour is, because the nature of warfare is also changing, we need to treat environment also as a separate victim, Okay, so the first need is the anthropocentric limitation of the existing law. The second is the limited scope of this provision. Limited scope because I told you, one, humans have to be targeted, and two, it has to be during the times of war. But what about peacetime? When two countries, they are not exactly in a war, in a full-blown war, if there's only escalation, if there's only conflict, or let's say there is nothing, there's a peace situation, it's a peace-like situation. In that case, if any damage is being caused by any other country, for example, one country's company, if it goes and starts its establishment in any other country, and there it is causing damage to that country's environment, will we not treat it as an environmental damage, or will we not treat it as a crime? So because it is silent about the times when peace is there. It is only saying, the existing laws are only saying that war needs to be there. War needs to be there and humans need to be targeted. So human centric, focusing only on humans as the victim, and then we are saying that only at times of war. What about the times when it is not exactly a war or it is a peace time? Okay. Lack of strong criminal liability. Strong criminal liability meaning because it's not a separate international crime, and right now also whatever we have, whatever existence we have in these provisions, here also the focus is not a lot on fixing the criminal accountability. There are fines, like not a lot of punishment. Not every time people or offenders are going to go behind the bars. There'll be fines that they have to pay. And when we talk about big companies or we talk about developed nations, country leaders, fine is a very small amount that they can pay, right? So there's a lack of strong criminal liability. Then rising ecological damage in modern conflicts. This is the changing nature of today's warfare, that many a times environment, ecosystem, they are also being targeted separately, because the focus over here, and even scientifically, they are being targeted in a manner, like we talked about black rain and everything, they are being targeted in the manner that physical damage also happens, and at the same time ecological damage also happens, because everybody understands the importance of nature in a person's life, in a country's development also, and that's why environment is also being targeted. So these provisions, they say, they have implicitly mentioned about ecocide in separate areas. And when we talk about IUCN, IUCN has recognized ecocide. It has explicitly recognized ecocide. But we need to understand that IUCN is not a law-making body. It has recognized ecocide means that it is giving utmost importance to ecocide. It is understanding that ecocide exists. Ecocide is the reality right now and it needs to be dealt with care. So it has recognized, IUCN has recognized, but when we talked about Geneva Convention, or we talk about the Rome Statute, or we talk about this environmental modification, there we are not explicitly mentioning ecocide to be a separate criminal offense. That's why there is a need, because of these reasons, there is a need that we develop this as an international crime. And once we do that, preventive and deterrent effect will be seen. If we fix a criminal liability, if we fix a heavy punishment, if we start putting people behind the bars, it is going to put a deterrence, or it is going to have a deterrent effect, meaning that people will now fear, country leaders will fear, companies will fear before they cause any damage to the environment. Right now they take things very lightly. At times they take things very lightly because the enforcement that we have is very weak. The enforcement of these laws, or the existence of laws also, is not very explicit in nature. So many a times people take advantage of this thing and they know that they can simply give a fine and they can move ahead. But that should not be the case. Once this happens, once it becomes an international crime, in that case preventive and deterrent effects will also be seen, right? But there are some challenges, and those challenges are, number one, there's a difficulty in achieving global consensus. Difficulty in achieving global consensus. Now, when we talk about environmental damage, so developed nations and developing nations, they have different opinions. Developing nations are still developing. They are still, they are still making use of, or they are basically developing their infrastructure, they're developing everything. And in that case, certain amount of environment damage is happening. Whereas the developed countries have already developed at the cost of the environment. So the developed nations now talk very heavy when it comes to environmental conservation, sustainable development and everything, but developing nations still need some kind of a flexibility that they should develop, and at the same time they should also balance ecological conservation. So this is something, a global consensus will have to be achieved if we want to declare ecological damage or environmental damage or ecocide to be a separate international crime. Then in that case a global consensus needs to happen. Then jurisdictional limitations of international courts are also there. Let's say we make it an international crime, okay, but in many cases we see that certain state parties, they are not exact, or certain countries, they are not exactly state parties to that international criminal court. And how will the prosecution take place? So this also is a serious challenge, that there is jurisdictional limitation of the international courts. And then weak enforcement due to geopolitical power dynamics. Now, We make laws, okay, we make it a criminal offense, we make serious laws, but enforcement needs to happen. Who is going to enforce that? There's no global police sort of a thing who's going to enforce everything. Countries are going to enforce it. Countries are going to enforce these laws about, like, on their own political will. So enforcement is going to depend on what? It is going to depend on the political will of countries. And if the major players, the strong players, the developed nations, if they do not show strong enforcement of laws, then they are going to set a wrong precedent. In that case, the other countries are also going to be demotivated when it comes to environment conservation, because they know that the enforcement is very weak. They can easily break laws. Nothing is going to happen. So that's something that we'll have to see. A weak enforcement is going to damage the entire situation. So even if we make it to be a separate international crime, because the need of the hour says so, we'll have to focus a lot on strong enforcement. Okay? So that was all for this video. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Now let's look at a practice question for prelims. And before we do that, we have a Studio GS Foundation live online course, which is going to help you complete your UPSC prelims and main syllabus in 14 months through 1250 plus hours of classes, printed class notes, and a live chat facility during the classes. You have 3 mediums that you can choose from: Hindi, English, and Hinglish, and the admissions are already open. You're getting all of this at 34,999 rupees. And you can also use a coupon code to get an additional discount. The code is SALONI, Saloni, all in capital letters only. So any queries you have, please call us at 87501 and you can also download the Drishti Learning app. Now let's move on to the practice question for today. With reference to Ecocide, consider the following statements. 1. It refers to large-scale destruction of the environment caused by human actions. 2. It is currently recognized as an international crime under the Rome Statute. 3. Existing international laws mainly link environmental damage to harm caused to human beings. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 1 only, B. 1 and 3 only, C. 1 and 2 only, or D. 1, 2 and 3. So please attempt this question and provide your answers in the comment section. Thank you for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.